The Prime Minister's been held up because there are a series of divisions in the House of Representatives. Still expected to hear from him sometime this hour, perhaps in the next 15 or 20 minutes. In the meantime, I'm going to cross down to Canberra regardless and catch up with our guest, Pauline Hanson, who was slotted in to talk to us, the One Nation leader. Thanks for joining us, Pauline Hanson. The government got the Medivac repeal bill through the Senate. Obviously, with your support, you were rock solid for them on this. They were waiting to see what Jackie Lambie would do. She says there was some kind of quid pro quo on national security. Any inkling as to what it was?
Have no idea. Jackie couldn't disclose it on the floor of Parliament. She said, I can't tell you what it is now. She was very emotional about it and very passionate as well. She said she was very divided with it, feeling concerned for the people and their health conditions, plus also very strongly supportive of our national security, and she understood what the government had to do with regards to this. So I have no idea what compromise, or I can't, I don't think, to use the word a deal and all the rest of it, I think she's put forward her concerns. The government are working with her towards that, and there's an agreement between both of them on how to best deal with it.
Yeah, but she certainly suggested that something has been promised to her or some concession has been made in order to get her support, and that she won't reveal it for national security reasons. So it does sound like a deal in the common parlance, doesn't it?
Chris, you're probably thinking a deal of what's going to be done for Tasmania or something like that. I don't believe it's on those lines. I had a brief talk with Jackie. She will not sell for any sort of a deal like that. I think it's to do with the actual bill itself and some security there based around the bill. She said you don't sell out, and I totally agree with her. No deal should be done on national security, whereas you're going to get something for your electorate. Other negotiations that we may have, the government wants it because we're crossbench, we're independents, and we don't get looked after like the political parties do, especially those in government. So we have to work hard for our electorates and put our case across. But talking to Jackie, I don't believe it was a deal done like she did with the housing for Tasmania. Nothing like that.
No, I agree with you, and that might be where some of the difference becomes here. I think it's very clear from what she said that if there's any concession given here, it's in the organisation of border security and offshore processing. It's something related to the issue at hand. I don't think there's any suggestion from what she said that there's been some sort of horse trading on another issue. So, yeah, I think that's important to make that clear. Just on that, though, there's going to be a lot of curiosity now. I think Labor are going to go very hard on what happened here, what was the trade-off. Yet they seem to have stopped asking you about why you suddenly decided to oppose the Union Integrity Bill last week. It takes all the pressure off you. You haven't really given us an idea, any clarity as to why you got a lot of amendments made to the legislation but then knocked it off.
Chris, I was leaning towards supporting the legislation after we had extensive talks with unions from all sides. It was the AWU. We had about 10 different unions that came through my office. We discussed with them, and it was going to wrap up these other unions. We know that the government was after the CFMEU, but it was going to encompass all these other unions. Just these, like the nurses, the teachers, the plumbers, the electricians, all these other unions.
I don't think there's many thugs. I don't think we've heard of too much thuggery in the nursing union or the electrical trades union.
They're going after deregistration of unions, and that was in this bill. Also, to deal with administration, if they took over the unions, put in administrators. The government can't even get it right and haven't gone after the administrators, the liquidators and receivers to do with the banking sector. They haven't dealt with the bank executives who ripped off, and especially Westpac, for 23 million breaches that are there. There's a lot of other issues. I respect unions as well. Chris, how often do we get in here? We hear that the government or the coalition will clean up the unions. It was One Nation, that actually helped the government with their legislation in the ABCC bill. We improved their bill, actually, in 2016 when we actually backed their ABCC bill. That was to clean up the union construction cost of that extra 30%, which Linda Reynolds made comment that it was to do with this bill. She didn't even know what the hell she's talking about, and she's Minister for Defence. Now, when we actually supported the government's legislation on ROCs, we supported that as well. That was again to bring in about the registered organisations to deal with unions and other organisations. Now, this bill, I've said to the unions, And I've told them, I said, you know, Angels, I said, you're right, we're not. They know that they got some thuggery in there. They know that they need to clean these people out. I've given them a warning. I said, you clean up your own act, and I mean that as well. But until the government starts addressing the real issues in this country about multinationals paying their fair share of tax, the white-collar crime that is happening, the selling out of our land to ownership, foreign ownership, there's a lot of things, and white-collar crime, I'm sorry, I'm not going to go out there union bashing just for the sake of it. So, you know, I've given a warning to both the unions and the government, and what we need to do, Chris, is if we're going to keep throwing back and throwing forward about this, whoever's in government, you know that Labor gets in, they're going to wind it back. Isn't it about time that we sat around the table with the unions and industrial relations and businesses, big businesses and small businesses, and say, how are we going to work together? How are we going to prove the whole situation we are in this country so that we can progress forward? Because nothing will move. Industrial relations, I agree, needs a big clean-up, especially in sacking people, because unfair dismissal is just ridiculous, and that's why businesses won't put people on, employ them in full time, because if they want to get rid of that worker who's useless or don't turn up to work, they're frightened to because of the unfair dismissal claims, and that needs to be cleaned up.
Well, the government's going to press ahead with these reforms, have another crack at it. It sounds like there are some areas where you can bargain with them, where do some sort of deal on some sort of industrial relations reform. Well,
look, you know, the government says they want integrity. Well, where's their integrity in a lot of these other areas that I've just exposed?
Well, in fairness, you mentioned Westpac. In fairness, you mentioned Westpac, yeah. And the reason Westpac is in the news is because the Austrac is prosecuting them. They have been caught over these 23 million breaches, and they're going to face a massive penalty.
Well, let's see what penalty they face, because the unions, if they actually hold up a business, they got fines of $243,000 for the union itself, and for the individual, $43,000. So they're being whacked with heavy fines. We've set up all these other organisations.
We're expecting $1 billion or more for Westpac.
Well, I hope so, because we're talking about a banking sector, and yes, they do need to. So until the government proves to me that they are actually going to clean up that, because we need to clean up that area. And I'm absolutely angry about the government ministers and everyone saying that they've got in writing, and even the Prime Minister, in an article that I read, he said that it was in writing. Well, I'll tell the Prime Minister, and I will tell all the ministers there, if you want to keep accusing me of lying, that I gave you my word and it's in writing, well, I'll say to you, put up or shut up, because I give them permission to hand over to the media, to anyone, if it is in writing.
Well, that's fair enough point. So you're happy, yeah? If they say it's in writing, then they should produce that document, and you give them permission to do so.
Of course it does. Yep. And I backed them in bringing on the bill. I said, let's get it over and done with, because our offices were being inundated with phone calls from people all the time about this bill. We had unions constantly coming through our office. It was getting near the end of the year. And I said, Jackie, it has to be settled. We will bring it on. I tell the government that bring on the bill, and I supported them with gagging the debate, because we had to get it finalised. It was no good dragging it out.
Now, Pauline Hanson, on another issue, I didn't get to talk to Malcolm Roberts yesterday about the One Nation plan for the Murray-Darling Basin plan. What are you suggesting needs to be done to resolve this controversy over water? Are you suggesting that there should be lower water allocations for South Australia? Do you want to reduce the amount of water flowing into South Australia and use more of it upstream?
I think it's a crying shame to see the amount of water that's flowing out the mouth of the river, and they say it's to keep the mouth open. They've got a dredging there that goes on constantly all the time. Even when we had the floods, the huge amount of water that went through in the floods, they had the dredging stopped for about 3 days. That flow of water is not keeping the mouth open. They need to actually have a look at that. What I'm saying is they can't take another 450 gigalitres out of the Murray-Darling Basin and put it to environment. The Barmah Choke, all that flooding that's happening there. I've been around that area quite extensively, spoke to businesses. People are on their knees, no water, they're not planting the crops. If we don't have the crops, we can't have the food supply that we need in Australia. A big thing is it's been a balls up all the way along. The mismanagement of the Murray-Darling Basin Plan. They have never provided the infrastructure or further water resources for the increasing population that we have, and also John Howard should never have separated water from land in 2004. The Water Act needs to be revised, and we need to take the water out of the hands of people as speculators and trading with it. Water should be associated with the land, and these people who have water licences, I would actually take it off them like they did with the taxi industry. They wouldn't get anything for it because they buy these water licences in perpetuity. They don't pay any more for it than the initial cost of buying that licence, and year in, year out they trade it, and so these people who are not associated and trade in that water make a lot of money out of it. So especially in times of drought, where it would normally cost about $150 a megalitre for water, they are now charging about $800, $900, even up to $1,000 a megalitre for water, and that is ridiculous, and this is why the farming sector can't afford it.
Yeah, we're going to hear a lot more about this issue in coming months. Thanks for joining us, Pauline Hanson.